Hello. I just want to give parents a quick rundown on what we've been learning in patterning and what'll be on the test on Friday. So here it goes. We looked at 3 different types of patterns. Pattern 1 is a repeating pattern, 3-4-2, 3-4-2, 3-4-2. So students will have to identify the 3 types of patterns. In this case, it's a repeating. They'll have to describe it. Another way to say that is, what is the pattern rule? Here we just want to say something like, a core of 3, 4, and 2 repeats. As long as we have the word repeats and what is repeating, we are good. And then extending the next 3 terms. So in this case, 3-4-2, 3-4-2. What should come next? 3, 4, and 2 again. There's a repeating pattern. The second type of pattern we looked at is a pattern that goes up when the numbers keep getting bigger. We call that a growing pattern. So they need to identify a growing pattern when they see it. They need to identify the pattern rule. In this case, we want to always write it the same way. We want to identify our first number. So we're going to write start at 10, and then what is it doing? It's adding 3 each time. So that's kind of how we practice doing that. Start at 10, add 3 each time. We have to be able to extend patterns. So what are the next 3 terms? After 22, we'd get 25, then we'd get 28, and then we get 31. So students will have to identify them, ask what the pattern rule is, extend them. And the third pattern that we looked at is the opposite of growing. When the numbers are getting smaller, we are going to call that a shrinking pattern. And we're going to describe the pattern rule the same way we did for growings. We want to use the word start at to identify that first term. And instead of using the word add here, I'm going to use the word subtract. In this case, subtract 10 each time. We did this on Friday. Some students had a hard time identifying what was happening here with different numbers. So we talked about how we can subtract the first number. We take the first number and then subtract the second one from it, like this, and we get an answer of 10. They're allowed to use their calculator, so they could do that on their calculator, and then if we want to be sure, we could do that again. We can go 93 minus the next number and get 10, and then we could do it again if we wanted to be extra sure. And we're seeing that we keep going down by 10s. So we did practice that. We talked about that. Some students will recognize the pattern right away. Don't need to do that. Some don't necessarily see it. And sometimes we deal with big numbers. For example, in one of the questions they had to do, the pattern was going down by 2, but it was big numbers. So it started at 1008, and then it went to 1006, and then it went to 1004. So many students had a hard time seeing that because it's such a big number. They're not used to big numbers. So they had a hard time seeing that it was going down by 2. Whereas if it had just been an 8 and then a 6 and then a 4, it would have been really easy for them to see. And for something like this, same thing. We got to extend the pattern. So after 63, we go down 10, then 43, then 33. Okay. So those are kind of the basics. The 3 main patterns, well, the 3 patterns that we're looking at is repeating, growing, and shrinking. There may be a couple of times where they see a pattern that's a little bit more complicated, something that maybe looks like this. 2, then 3, then 5, then 8, then 12. So we'll practice a few of those. You kind of want to see what's going on here. That's going up by 1, that's going up by 2, that's going up by 3, that's going up by 4. So the pattern is that it's adding 1 more than the last time, each time. And that's what they'd kind of want to write for their pattern rule. Those are a little bit trickier, but that's the basics. Let's talk about finding an exact term. So we've practiced this. What is the 20th term? Here we have a repeating pattern. So the one way they can do that is simply by counting to 20. So we got, there's our first term, there's our second, there's our third, there's our fourth, there's our fifth. If I kept going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, my 20th term is 1. So that's one way to do it. We talked about how we can use the core and how many digits are in there. So this is a core of 5 digits. And what we can do with that is we can take that last number in the core and count by 5s. So that 1 is going to be every 5th number. So 1 is going to be the 5th number, the 10th number, the 15th number, the 20th number, the 25th, the 30th, and so on and so on. We could use that to help us find something like that. We'd go 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, stop there. That would be 26, that would be 27. So a 4 would be my 27th term. Rather than counting all the way up to 27, we could just count by 5s. That's for a repeating pattern. We do the same thing with a growing pattern. What we talked about doing is going up to the 10th term. So here I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. My 8th, 9th, and 10th will be 47, 52, 57. So now I know that. If I want to find the 20th, I know that going from 10 to 20 is 10 more terms. And each term is going up by 5s. So I'm going to say 10 times 5. Again, they can use a calculator, but we did practice how to multiply by 10, is 50. So that means that the 20th term is going to be 50 more than this amount. So I can just do 57 plus 50 equals 107. Okay. A more complicated way that we discussed, which is a little bit challenging for them, is we can look at the 12 as the first term, and we could ask ourselves if there was a 0 term, it would be what? And we'd just go backwards by 5. So we would get to 12 minus 5 would give us 7. So I'm going to write the term 0 is 7. And my pattern rule is going up by 5. So we talked about how if we just take whatever term number we're trying to find times the pattern rule plus term 0, we are always going to get our answer. So in this case, we could take 32 times the pattern rule, which is going up by 5, so times 5, and then we multiply that, which is 160 plus 7 gives us 167. Okay, I would expect them to use a calculator for that, not to be able to do it without that. Okay, but that's another way that we talked about doing that. And lastly, we have tables and graphs. So if we look at this, Jim starts with $20 in week 1. He saves $5 in each week. How much money does he have after week 7? We can use a table to show this information. So we put weeks and then the money. So the weeks are just going up by 1. Jim starts with 20 and then saves 5 more. And now he has 5 more, 5 more. So using a table can be a good way to show a pattern, especially when we're dealing with an application type question, a real situation. And we also practice graphing that information, which we're going to need to practice a little bit more this week.